Welcome to Psych Sessions Mentoring. In these episodes, Kenzie Peterson and Mona Shu chat with their guests about all things mentoring in higher education. So thanks for tuning in and welcome to Psych Sessions Mentoring.
Hi, this is Xiaomeng Xu or Mona Shu.
And this is Kenzie Peterson. And this is a special Psych Session series on mentoring.
Our guest today probably needs no introduction to listeners of this podcast. We're so excited to be speaking with scientist educator, Dr. Eric Landrum, who is professor and department chair in the Department of Psychological Science at Boise State University. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me. And will you do me a favor, Mona, will you say your native pronunciation of your name again, please?
Sure. It's Xiaomeng Xu.
That is awesome. You're very kind. First off, names are important. I think we've had this conversation before. Names are so important. And you are very gracious to give us backward Americans a very shortcut version of saying your name. But it's really elegant to hear you say your name in your native voice and your native language. So thank you for saying that twice now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Eric. I actually have a little link to a recording of me saying my name on my website in case anyone wants to double check it. And it's okay if you can't pronounce it. My partner certainly can't, even after many years of trying. Some of those sounds just don't exist in English. So.
Well, and there's an app that goes along that sits in like email, Gmail, that I know some instructors use where it's like, I'm not going to be able to remember what the app is, but you can have it like part of your Gmail sign off, Dr. Eric Landrum, and this is how you pronounce it. And there's a hyperlink in it. And I know, is it VG Sathi and maybe some others I've seen at teaching of psychology conferences have presented about this. And it's really cool just to get people the idea that you can say these difficult names, and if you need some help, some instructors are really cool about providing it. So I know that's not what we're talking about today, but when you surprised me with that gem, I just had to enjoy it a little bit more. And by the way, the power of editing, no one may ever hear this. And so I'll leave that up to the two of you.
I'm really happy that you brought that up, though, because I think some students sometimes get really intimidated by being able to pronounce some professors' names. So I think it's helpful to have that resource. I think that's really cool. Thank you.
It really is. Even things like on professor's door outside their office, even when it has something as simple as doctor. If you're walking in to talk to a professor, what do you address them by? If it says Mona, or if it says Dr. Mona, even that makes a difference in that question of how do I address this professional in this professional space can make a really big difference.
I'm also incredibly lucky to have as another option, Professor X is what I tell students sometimes if they have trouble with.
And I get my universes confused. Is that the DC universe or the Marvel universe?
It's the Marvel universe.
Thank you very much. And so I would imagine they think that is super awesome. I'm having a class from Dr. X this afternoon, and she's teaching intro psych or cognitive or whatever. Dr. X is awesome.
Well, I think we'll just go ahead and jump into this then. We'll start talking about mentoring. So, Eric, I wanted to ask you, what is mentoring, or what is a mentor?
Okay, well, thanks for your time with me. I really appreciate it. And that's been the end of this podcast. So Kenzie, help me again. What is mentoring and what is a mentor? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have dictionary.com up on any of these screens, so I'm just going to have to wing it. I think mentoring is probably one individual helping another individual at its basic form. And that help can be personal, professional, private, public. I think it could take a number of different shapes. But to me, that's mentoring. I think we traditionally think of mentoring as an older adult helping someone who is younger. That could be an adult, that could be a child. I think that's a very narrow view of it. As I've aged. I think I realize now in my life, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, I have mentors. I have many mentors. I don't have just one mentor. And I have mentors that are older than I am. And I have many mentors who are younger than I am. I have mentors that are helping me with professional tasks and goals, and I have mentors who help me with personal tasks and goals. And so I think it's multi-complicated. It's a multi-universe DC Comics, Marvel crossover type of situation. It's not, to me, it's not unidimensional. It's really complicated. And anyone who's not leveraging mentors is missing out. It's the same thing as anyone who's not leveraging the ability to ask for help in psychotherapy. If the stigma of psychotherapy and not asking for help, you're missing out on tremendous resources. Anyone who's not seeking the help and support of a mentor is missing out on tremendous opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you talking about the importance of mental health. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think you had the Helped Me project, or I'm not sure the word around that. But was that when you were president of Psychi?
Yeah, it was an initiative that I started with Psychi. And honestly, it didn't get that far. And of course, everyone gets to say it was sidetracked by COVID. So it was sidetracked by COVID. I would, when I finish my term as chair of my department, I would love to circle back for that as one of the things that I spend the twilight of my career doing. I don't know if I get to do voices on your podcast. I don't know. I may.
You get to do whatever you want.
Okay. Well, we should really talk about that sometime in a different podcast. I would really like to circle back to that because we all know there's so much of a stigma, and there's lots of great people and organizations who work on that. The angle I wanted to take is that we should celebrate those who have been helped. We do tend to celebrate the caregivers, but we don't celebrate the care receivers. And I think sometimes if we focused more on those people receiving that care and tell their stories, maybe we might break down some barriers for some people. And so that's what Help Me was about. And we got off the ground, and there are some really cool stories from some Psychi chapters around the nation where there are, they might have some officers, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and bless my heart, some of them have a Help Me officer, which is the most amazing thing that warmed the cockles of my heart, whatever cockles are. It really just warmed me to hear about that. And I would like to jump back into that in a year or so.
Well, we will look forward to that. And yes, pandemic sidetracked many things, but I will say what I saw of it was super cool. I remember just getting a pin about, and then just having someone at your level with your visibility use your platform for something like that and to name it and to try to destigmatize, I think is incredibly important.
Well, Mona, thank you. I appreciate that. That's really kind of you. Sometimes you have to take tenure out for a spin, and sometimes you have to take privilege out for a spin. And so I'm a hetero white male, and I have an enormous amount of privilege. And I've baked that over 33 years of a career. So I should take it out for a spin every now and again and do some good with it. And as opposed to just self-serve me, I can serve others. I can serve other people. And it's taken me a while to get to that perspective. I haven't always been that way. And so it's a great chance for me to help serve other people.
Thank you, Eric. Circling back to our mentoring discussion, next we have a question about your mentoring style. How would you describe your mentorship style?
Oh my gosh, you're assuming that I have a style. It's really adorable, or adorbs, as the kids say, right? That's really adorbs. I don't know. Off the cuff, is that a style? I think it's more collegial. So when I work with students on research, which I haven't while I've been chair, but in the before times, I would say it would be more, let's work on this project together. So for a long time, I have not had big labs where I'd have, 10 students working in a lab and then 4 students kind of running the lab. I've done that here at Boise State, but it's been over 20 years since I've done that. I tend to work with students one-on-one on research projects. And so that mentoring tends to be a weekly meeting where we're going to meet and talk about something. Okay, how much progress did you make on the introduction section this week? And let's submit our IRB. All right, we're going to collect data in 3 weeks. Let's get, so it's much more of 2 researchers working together, mentoring and trying to do some role modeling. If I had a style for mentoring with students, I would say it's collaborative.
And Eric, what influenced this mentoring style and how did you develop it?
Yeah, Kenzie, that's a really good question. And I'd say I'm not very creative. And so I grabbed it from the mentoring I was exposed to as an undergraduate back in the 1800s. And so when I went to Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois, a small private liberal arts school, I had amazing mentors in a 3-person department of psychology. And they worked with me in that exact same way, where I was their research assistant. I met with them when I was doing a project for credit on a weekly basis. I did a senior thesis. I did this and that. I was president of my psychi chapter, which kind of turned out to be good for my future. And I got amazing amount of attention as an undergraduate. And so I have tried my entire career, professional career, to replicate that, to give students at Boise State with 22,000 undergrads and 900 majors in psychology, to give 4 or 5 students a year the same kind of experience that I had being mentored as an undergraduate student at Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois. And so I know there's other mentoring models for undergraduates. I've read a little bit about them, but the one that worked for me is the one that I tried to replicate here.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier when you were talking about using privilege and that progress. I wanted to ask you a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how that's shown up or not in your mentoring experiences. So either as a mentor or as someone being mentored.
As being a mentor, I have purposely made an effort to be open to mentoring students from all backgrounds. And I probably became more aware of this and purposeful. And Mona, I'm just going to be honest about it. Maybe I'm 33 years into my career, and I probably became more aware of this about 10 years ago. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about it's been an important part of my career my entire life. I'm sorry, it hasn't been. It hasn't been on my radar that long. I'm just not going to BS like that. But once I kind of had some people really open my eyes to what was going on, and I didn't come to it on my own. I'm just going to say that. But people around me, personally and professionally, kind of helped me see some things. Then I didn't exclude students, but I purposely invited more students who may not have felt comfortable approaching me. I made myself more approachable to them. And so, boy, you're both probably too young for the Mod Squad. So I didn't cherry pick. I didn't have a quota of, one black, one blonde, one redhead. It wasn't like that. But it was like, I wanted to make sure that students from all classes, from all backgrounds, if I was recruiting for RAs, they knew about my research and they were welcome to come talk to me. And I wasn't going to force anybody. I wasn't going to have a quota system, but I wanted to make sure. And I think if you looked back on the last 10, 12 years, you'd find there's a lot more variety in the people he worked with and the genders of people, the backgrounds of people, and that was purposeful. Before then, it wasn't purposeful, and there'd probably be some clear patterns. And, in psychological science, and I think for Idaho State as well as Boise State, 80% of our undergraduate majors are female. So it's actually kind of rare to work with a male undergraduate, but also there's a really high proportion, at least at Boise State, of Hispanic female undergraduates. And so just being open to understanding people and their different backgrounds, and even things like rural versus urban, is a big deal. And it's been a relatively new epiphany for me. I'm glad it's happened. I was slow to the draw.
I think that's perfectly fine. And I appreciate the insight. So you're not post hoc rewriting things and recognizing, hey, this shift happened and I'm learning and I'm growing.
Yeah, if post hoc anything, I can be hypercritical or just regular critical. There's a lot to criticize. And I'm not doing this to, oh, look at him, he sounds so humble. No, there's a whole lot to be critical of in terms of decisions and things and how come he did this and that. I can look back and I can see the flaws. I've got the list in triplicate. We can go there if you want to, anytime you want.
Well, I think now would be a good time if you're open to that. Would you like to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, of course. Here's the thing, and in fact, we just had a faculty retreat yesterday. And one of the things that came up is that even on things like social media, no one ever talks about, you always see the successes, right? You did this, you published this book, you wrote this paper, you got this grant. No one ever talks about the grant they applied for and didn't get. No one ever talks about, hey, just got my second divorce. There's never this I tried and didn't make it, or I tried and I failed. And I am a privileged white male, and for a very long time, I was a bull in a china shop and didn't look around and see what was going on in the world around me. And I'm going to say this as gently as I can. The Pacific Northwest has pockets in it that are really racist. And I, as a white male, wasn't a victim of that racism, and I wasn't paying attention to it. It wasn't affecting me directly. It wasn't affecting my day-to-day life. I didn't see a lot of it. I can say with confidence, I wasn't overtly committing it against my fellow human beings, but it was happening and I was ignoring it because I was oblivious to it. And that's on me. And a lot of people around me suffered for a long time and continue to do so. And that's not all right. That's not good. That's a huge flaw for me. And I'm late to understanding that, and understanding the impact, and understanding why a lot of people are pissed off about their scenario in life. And they have every right to be.
Could you tell us a little bit about if there was a particular turning point or what led about to this? What was it a decade ago that led to this?
I had a visit from a couple of my nieces who came out to visit before they actually moved out here about 8 to 10 years later. And they were junior high school, and they lived in Virginia. My nieces are of mixed race. I didn't know them very well before then. And I got to spend a little bit of time going out to lunch and going out to dinner with them and just listening to their life and listening to how people treated them. And they had spent some time in Idaho, and their mother is my wife's sister. So they're family. So they're obviously they're my nieces, but I didn't really get to know them very well until then. And then they're telling stories about Idaho, and I'm going, what? How this has happened in my town? Really? And it's like, okay, wow. And then I start talking more to my colleagues at Boise State, my minoritized colleagues at Boise State. And really, okay. And so it's been happening all along. And I'm not trying to be hypercritical of Boise State or Idaho or the Pacific Northwest. It's more a criticism of me that it's been happening, and there's racism all around the United States. There's racism all around the world, but my head was in the sand, and there is a lot of human suffering going on. And for me, it's not cool to ignore it. It's not cool to just go la-di-da and just keep going on and having a happy-go-lucky life and not care about it and not think about how, in my own way, how can I affect change? Yeah, so it took family to open my eyes to it, to be honest. They were my mentors. My nieces were my mentors.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty common experience, especially out here in Idaho, where there isn't a whole lot of diversity, that it's getting that exposure to people who are from a different background and who are different from, you and I, and having that be just a catalyst for changing your points of view on that. It's so helpful, but it is difficult that it has to come to that it's not something that you had been able to change beforehand, before that exposure to those people.
Yeah, and that's all on me. Trust me, I'm not sitting around blaming societal structures. They're the reason why I didn't see it. No, this is on me. This is on white male privilege and barreling through life. And yeah, this is me. Wow, that's fun.
But I think the recognition and then the embracing of, okay, now that I am no longer oblivious, now that I have privilege that I can spend, what can I do? What can I do, on the day-to-day basis, and then maybe bigger things, structural things and things using your positions in power. That's a good place to be, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so there are some things like help me. So destigmatizing mental health, because there are mental health disparities amongst different populations and subpopulations in our country. And so when I was getting ready to launch that initiative, I knew I was going to launch an initiative, and all the people who know me closely would have did swear, maybe swear a lot, that I would have launched something about undergraduate skills, because that's something I'm super passionate about. I've written a lot about, and I caught a couple people off guard about what? Help, what? What? Stigmatizing mental illness? I had to pull together some people who knew more about that and knew more about public policy to understand what needed to be done. And so Psychi was really supportive of giving me the space to figure that out. And we pulled together, a consortium of people in Chattanooga for a weekend. It included, I don't want to leave out anybody, but included some really top psychologists from around the country who came together to give me some advice about what to do.
So as you've gained experience as a mentor, what have you learned, or what's surprised you?
What have I learned, or what surprised me? I think in any really good mentoring relationship, the mentor can probably gain as much as possible, or as much or more as the mentee gains. So if it's done well, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, even if it's not designed to be that from the beginning. I won't speak for how Mona feels about this, but I guess she's in a similar place. Being around people who are eager to learn and eager to improve their skills is very energizing for faculty members. It may be an overstatement to say it keeps you young, but it keeps you invigorated. It keeps you coming to work in a workplace that is sometimes difficult to grapple with. And when you're mentoring someone who's excited about the science of psychology, who's excited about doing their own study, who's excited about going to a regional conference for the first time. When I've been to a regional conference 400 times in my career, that excitement invigorates me to be excited for them. That to see their excitement through their eyes, as I saw once 450 years ago. And so it's really fun. It's fun to see that. And so I think that's what you oftentimes get out of mentoring. Mentoring is also a tremendous amount of work. Let's be clear about that. It's essentially teaching a class of one. We have efficiencies of scale when we teach a class of 150 or 30 or 50 or 75. It's really time efficient. mentoring, and maybe this is the dirty little thing we never talk about, mentoring is time inefficient. But that investment of time has a great deal of payoff for the mentee. And oftentimes it has a great deal of payoff for the mentor.
And I would definitely agree with you on the reinvigoration piece of it. I think, getting to work with students, and especially when you have a one-on-one relationship that you can see develop over more than just a semester, that can be incredibly rewarding. And I appreciate that analogy to teaching a class of one and the inefficiency. But I think, yes, there are some fantastic products that can happen for the mentee as well as the mentor. But I think with that type of relationship too, you're getting something about the process that in and of itself is really incredible. And it's not necessarily about efficiency or about product or what can come out of it, but the actual doing it, the practice can happen.
Oh, it's absolutely not about efficiency. Otherwise, if it was about efficiency, the university wouldn't let us do it. But I think they understand the developmental benefit to students of being mentored one-on-one with a faculty member, and those meetings, those chats. I mean, even for the two of you, think about, you can sit together and work on a research project, but it's also those conversations. It's that time. And Kenzie, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but it's the role modeling that you're seeing in that professional that you're meeting with, and how she handles emails from her boss and her boss's boss, and how when you went to RMPA, how you saw her interact with professionals, and how she introduced you to people, and how she helped you network. That's that mentoring relationship. That's that mentoring, the benefit of it. Time consuming, but highly beneficial.
Yeah, and it's so helpful. I can't even imagine going to grad school and not having a mentor that you could work with, especially one that I feel very compatible with, like Mona. And that I can see her, just as you were describing, like going out there and having professional conversations with people and having her help me out with my project. And I mean, even right before we were recording this, we were talking about the process of like my growth as I've worked through my thesis, because it hasn't been always the easiest project to manage. I've had a lot of hiccups along the way. And it's just so nice too to have somebody there who believes in me and can help me out with this project as I work on it, and assure me that things are going to be okay. And I just imagine that, that relationship is so rewarding for you guys just as much as it is for me.
And so will you end up doing a thesis defense when you're all finished?
Yes, I am scheduled to defend at the end of this month.
Okay, so here's the cool thing about a mentor. A good mentor, and I am confident that Mona is a good or a great mentor. A good mentor will never let you defend your thesis or doctoral dissertation unless you're ready. So it's scheduled for the end of August, but let's say that for some unknown reason or unexpected reason that you're not ready, she'll have you reschedule it, because she doesn't want you to embarrass herself. And the other dirty little secret, she doesn't want you to embarrass her, because because that thesis defense is as much about her in some ways as it is about you. Mm-hmm. And good mentors will not allow their mentees to be put in a place where there could be some real damage. I mean, it's one thing if you did it wrong, but if it's incomplete, that's something else. Or if it's not quite done yet, and she's going to know if it's not quite done yet. I mean, if she'd been giving you advice and you've been doing it wrong, you've been fighting her the whole way. Well, Mona wouldn't do that but I might say, yeah, go ahead, defend. I've given you all the advice. You've ignored me. All right, learn the hard way. She probably is too nice. She wouldn't do that. But really good advisors and mentors like that will make sure that you are prepared, that make sure you're poised for success. You still have to do all the work. You still have to defend. You still have to answer the questions. You'll still be nervous, but she will know that you're going to shine because she's prepped you. She's got you ready. She's asked you the questions that she thinks her colleagues are going to ask you. And that's a sign of a really great mentor.
Thank you both. And to our listeners, I this is not a series about me. So let's move away from that.
It's a series about mentoring.
Yes. And yeah. And I do appreciate all the very nice things. And absolutely, you're right, Eric. Kenzie is going to shine at the end of the month. She knows this project inside and out, and it's going to be great.
And Mona, was I incorrect? If by some odd chance she wasn't ready, would you let her go forward?
No, of course I would not.
And there it is. It's really difficult to be right as much as I am. I might okay, we got to edit that part out. I might make it look easy, but it's really way more difficult. I'm sorry. I wish I could have said that with a straight face.
I think we should probably leave all this in.
I trust your editorial chops. You can do what you will.
Well, with that, Eric, let's go ahead and ask you another question. What advice would you give to mentors?
I guess I would, if it was one piece of advice, take the commitment seriously. So it's okay to say no, and Mona can talk more about the no. It's okay to say no to someone who comes up and asks for you to supervise a thesis or be on a committee or something else. If you don't have the time to make a serious commitment to be a high quality mentor, it's better to say no than to say yes and do a lousy job, because you'll end up doing more harm than good. And faculty members are kind of trained in a weird way to say yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And in many systems on some campuses, being a mentor will not gain the faculty member anything, meaning it might be something that's above and beyond teaching, research, and service. You might not put it on your CV. You might not report it in your annual faculty reporting mechanism. Hopefully your department gives you credit for it and values it. Some departments will value it more than others. Really take the commitment of being a mentor seriously. And if you have to put it off, put it off. If you have to say no, say no. If you're not a good match and fit. So, Kenzie, if you were wanting to do psychoneuropathology, and if Mona is not a psychoneuropathologist, Mona should probably say no to mentoring you because she doesn't have the specialty match with what you're proposing to do. And in some ways, it could be borderline unethical for me to mentor someone in an area which I don't have the expertise. I might be able to give some general advice about what to do and what not to do, but if I'm stretching outside of my area, it's probably not a good thing most of the time. So take the commitment that you're making to that student seriously in terms of mentoring. If we're talking about faculty members mentoring other faculty, that's a little bit more loosey-goosey. If it's not a formal faculty mentoring mechanism, a lot of that informal mentoring happens over email, over phone calls, over meetings at conferences like the annual conference on teaching, when you meet up with someone. So the commitment is probably not as severe or as serious as it is with a student and a faculty member.
Yeah, I really appreciate you explicitly noting that there are times when you should say no to things. And that little reference about me talking about the no is some people who are listening to this have heard me talk ad nauseum about the no committee. So having some people who you run things by, whose job it is to have your best interest at heart and tell you if you should say yes or no to opportunities. So in addition to things like expertise, if you already have way too much on your plate that you're not going to be able to really wholeheartedly do something, right? You're going to be super late on responding. You're going to be not really focused on the person, then it doesn't serve them or you well to say yes. So yeah, say no more than you probably are.
Right. Or the other piece of that I tell my colleagues all the time, if you want to say yes to this new mentoring opportunity, that's awesome. Tell me what you're going to stop doing. Because I don't know any colleague at Boise State who is slouching, who is just mailing it in. I'm sure there are some. Obviously, there would be some somewhere. But that's fine. You want to take on this new mentor, you want to take it seriously, reducing sleep is not a healthy option. So tell me what you're going to stop doing. You're going to step away from a committee. Okay. You're not going to teach that overload class you were planning on. Okay. Tell me what you're going to stop doing so that you can have the bandwidth to do a great job. But that's a no to something else. So a yes to this means a no to something else.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you to our listeners for listening. Eric, what's your favorite form of self-care our listeners should think about for themselves?
Well, there's two things in there. My favorite form of self-care may not be something that listeners should think about for themselves. I mean, let me answer the second part first. Listeners should think about some meaningful form of self-care for themselves. Sometimes that involves money, and sometimes that involves time. And whichever it is for a listener, find it and make it, right? So if it involves money to be able to do something, then set that aside. Or if it just involves time to do something, then set that aside. What's the phrase? And I'm going to broaden it after I say it. If mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. Well, if you're not happy, you're not happy, right? So you can't take care of others in your life, and you can't take care of your students in your life if you're not taking care of you in your life. And so we get so busy that we think, I can't go golfing. I can't take my dog for a walk. I can't get a mani-pedi. I can't go visit my parents. I can't go to the movies. I can't watch Netflix. I can't go to the mall to my favorite store. I can't go to my favorite restaurant. It's I can't. And if you don't do whatever that thing is for you every now and again, people get cranky and they get depressed. And then it's a spiral, as we all understand. For me, my outlet, let's see, which one of the outlets can I talk about? I'm trying to be funny. For me, my outlet is probably the one I can talk about is woodworking. So I have a 3-car garage, and my wife has been really kind to give me the third bay as a shop. So I have a shop out there, and I do little things with my hands. I have to get away from screens. I have 3 screens in front of me right now. I'll go home and watch TV, or I'll get back on the computer. I have to get out from screens. And so I'll go out and sweat out in the garage and build little things, make pens or bandsaw boxes or this and that, just goof around. And half of woodworking is covering up your mistakes. And I kind of like that. So you make a mistake on something. Oh, how can I prettify that? Oh, that's kind of fun. So for me, that's what it is. Time out in the garage. And when I haven't had time out in the garage for a while, I do get cranky. You can ask the people in my life. I do get cranky. So that's the self-care for me.
Great. Thank you so much. And I hope you have plenty of time for woodworking coming up. Do you schedule it in?
I don't. And some of it is weather dependent. It's been what we call damn hot here lately. It's been in the hundreds about the last 40 days in a row, it feels like. And that makes the garage like 110, 120. And I just can't handle that. So I have to find other things to do, or I get stuck in front of the TV when I get home. But when it cools off, I'll get out there and I'll tinker.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric, so much for your time today and for chatting with us. And thank you all for listening. And stay tuned for more in this mentoring series.